Hey, hello and welcome to another episode of Rewriting the Rules. Today I have with me the lovely Rebecca Hanlon, and I'm going to pass you over to her so she can introduce herself. She's got some really exciting and wonderful things she's doing. So over to you, Rebecca.
Hi Bethany, thank you so much for having me. I've been very excited since we last spoke. I think our ethoses are very, very similar on
Yeah.
things, so it's nice to know other people think on similar lines. So yeah, I'm Rebecca Hanlon. My business is The Dog Witch, and I run an online platform called the Canine Wellness Circle. So I started off in human mental health straight from school, really. I went to college, but didn't really sit right with me. I just got straight into work. So by 16 I was working in nursing homes and found a real passion for sort of dementia, I suppose, and sort of the more what they class then as difficult clients, and sort of advocating for them, really. So that's kind of how I started. And then I ended up, when I was 21, starting to work in secure units, with people with mental health issues, with learning disabilities as well. And I've worked sort of 20 years really over a broad sector of different care, sort of mostly mental health, and learning disabilities in that time. And I loved it and was extremely passionate. Ended up writing lots of syllabuses that tried to help with rehabilitation back into sort of society, and to try and give people that didn't have a voice a voice. So I did a lot of advocacy work and creating things for people so that they could start taking power over their own meetings. Because when I first started, it was very much about everyone sitting in a room and talking about them while they were there. So I tried to bring in sort of things where they could create videos and booklets about themselves so they could take the meetings themselves and make them more about them, which is what it was meant to be about. So it was basically person-centered planning was, and there was even a course that I went on which was all about person-centered planning. So I did that for 20 years and then kind of got a bit burnt out for various reasons. And I took a year off with my husband and we traveled around Europe with our dogs, which was amazing. And in that time, we ended up with a dog that just sort of turned up on our doorstep, literally. We thought badgers had been going through our bins and then realized that it was a dog. It took us 4 days to get him. And yeah, we already had two dogs as well, but he came traveling with us. Um, and he obviously had, lots of problems. He turned up sort of, he was about 14 kilos, full weight. He was 34 kilos. And this was in the UK as well. Um, we think he'd been used as a stud dog. He had lots of scars all over his paws, looked like he'd been trying to get out of cages and things like that. Um, and Andrew had been to university with somebody that had done animal behavior. So we contacted her and I was like, I didn't even know this job existed. I mean, this is just amazing. And at that moment, I was like, okay, I want a career change. So, because I was burnt out from sort of the human side, I basically embarked on retraining as a dog behaviorist. So I always wanted to do the behavior side. It wasn't really the training side that kind of interested me. But obviously I had to become a trainer first because, you needed those skills before you got to being a behaviorist. And then when I did my level 6, which was probably about 6 years ago now, I did my dissertation on how shocked I was that we were still in behaviourism so deeply with dog psychology, and yet we'd come away from that decades ago in human psychology. And that it was just everything was so operant based. It was all about how we can prevent things from happening and how we can stop behaviors and how we can reinforce behaviors, and everything was just so excessively focused on what the dogs were doing and not what the dogs were experiencing. So that was basically my dissertation, and looking at lots of different sort of ways to bring in the types of things that we had in human health into dog well-being. Um, so yeah, I've been kind of fighting that ever since, really. I call myself a behaviourist because that's what Google recognizes. I struggle even with that I quite often will say that I am a dog trainer because people don't even know what a behaviourist is. But I kind of identify more as a mental health and wellbeing practitioner for dogs. And the Canine Wellness Circle is very much about the fact that we we are, I think, in our industry, we're almost bred and taught to fight for our own kind of work. It's quite a saturated industry at the moment as well, and I think it's all about making sure that we get on top of marketing, and that we have these lovely fancy videos of dogs walking nicely by our side, and that's what gets all the attention, and we're not collaborating. I think it's almost like collaboration is, even when people try and collaborate, there's still a massive amount of competition within that, which causes a huge amount of friction, I think, in the industry. So the Canine Wellness Circle for me is very much about me bringing people into that circle, such as yourself, and showing people that there are so many different options to support our dogs than, and I'm not against training, I'm not against behaviorism, but they should be such tiny, tiny, minute parts of how we support our dogs, in my opinion. So yeah, it's trying to push people to the front that are doing just amazing work. I mean, I just love what you do. And yeah, showing people that there's just so much out there, and it's exciting, and that we should be working together for the better of dogs. Yeah, so that's kind of me in a nutshell.
And that's absolutely fantastic. I mean, right from the start, everything that you've done, this amazing work for, advocating for people. And I loved what you said, like that didn't have a voice. And so advocating for them and making changes. And I can see how you've naturally progressed that into your work with dogs. And I think it's really interesting that you've had that history. 20 years is such a long time, and you've built such an amount of information and compassion in that time. I think that's a fantastic thing to then just be able to transfer over. And I can imagine your shock, just as you come into the dog world, and we're like, why are we so behind the times? And that's been our biggest struggle. And I think one of the things, I mean, I really do relate to so much of what you were saying, and everything you just said, I really do relate to. And I think, the first thing I wanted to, pick up from that was that, behaviorism is something that we have seen as such a progressive thing. And it's not that behaviorism itself, and I like we say, it's not that it's a bad thing, but when we put it at the forefront of everything we do, which is what we do, and we do, we polish it up in different flavors, and it looks different, and we dress it up differently depending on what style we want to use with it, but it's still within the framework of behaviorism. And when you actually look at what behaviorism is, it's actually very limiting. And
Yeah.
when you look at, like, if you want to call them the founders of behaviorism, and the history of where that came from, and the things they believed, and the fact that this really it stemmed from something, a belief that, even us as humans didn't, emotions were irrelevant. That was it wasn't a controversial belief. It was just a standard belief that emotions were either not relevant or non-existent. It didn't matter, and therefore all that matters is this external output from what we put in, so internal and external. And it was just about, it's very much a mechanical way of
Yes.
viewing animals, or viewing any sentient being. And although we have come quite far from that time, thankfully, and we have incorporated, okay, we recognize that animals are sentient, and we recognize that they have these emotions. But what we've tried to do with that, and I don't know if you agree with me here, but it's like we tried to squash that into a framework that it was never built for. And so you
Yeah.
get this conflict. And then this is where you see, where it is just stripped down to reward the stuff you like, or either ignore the stuff you don't like and reward the stuff you do like, or punish the stuff you don't like and reward the stuff you do like. So and when you strip it down, that can all be dressed up in so many different ways, and there's lots of different training styles to incorporate that within balance training, within the force free community. but it's very, very simplistic. And I do think that, when, especially with your history with coming from psychology and, understanding the human mind and working with mental health, because obviously you will know a fair bit about psychology. You understand how the brain works and how emotions unpack and how they impact our behavior. And that, I think, gave you that insight. And, coming into that, making the changes that you've done, I think that's absolutely fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel like things are slowly getting there. I feel like, and I think, I guess it's when people say it's that it's a very cliche thing to say, but you're finding your tribe, and I think it is about that, but also I think reaching everyone as well, because what we don't want to ever do is become elitist. I think that's that you get these sort of ideas of our way is the best, and
Mm.
that's something else that I've always tried to avoid. That I'm not about saying what I feel is wrong. I just lead by what I feel is right. And then if people want to be a part of that or want to share what they do, then that's great. And if they don't, they don't have to. And I think this is the thing with when I did work in mental health, is that everybody was okay coming to the table with their ideas. And I don't feel that we have that. We're all quite lone workers, I think, in this industry. And so I think it's really put a kind of massive block in the way of what we do, because we're not sharing information in the way that we should. And even when people do share the information, I still see this very patriarchal way of doing it. And I think that's, I mean, you could get me right off on one when I start talking about, because it's not just in behavior with our dogs, it's not just in that side of things, it's also schools and how children are taught, it's also in the health system at the moment. And it's so true what you said. We've learned all of these new things. We know how important emotions are now in our well-being. They're not irrelevant, they're very much everything. They're basically everything, aren't they? That and we've brought in that, and yet because of that westernized way of dealing with things, everything has got kind of a bit stuck, because we are still trying to fit round pegs into square holes. And I think that's, again, for me, it's having that holism, it's that holistic approach that we're so missing in most of our Western kind of cultures. And it's not across the globe, it's not everybody thinks like we do. Surprise, surprise. You know, but we go into a doctor's, and you can't list off all of your symptoms. They just want to know one, because that's how they've been taught to cope with you. And you give me, okay, no, you've got a bad shoulder. And you try and say, well, actually, yeah, but I've been struggling breathing a little bit recently as well. And they're like, well, let's focus on your shoulder first. And they miss the fact that actually your shoulder pain could be from your lungs and
Yeah.
you not being able to breathe properly. And we do the same with dogs all the time. We just look at that outward behavior, exactly like you said, and we forget about all of the other things that are going on in that dog's body and that dog's mind and that dog's environment and their life as a whole. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, I think that's what's dangerous in our culture at the moment, and we need to break out of, is that we need a more holistic approach. And I'd even go as far to saying that our universities are letting us down. I see a lot of people coming out of uni with and I'm not saying going to university is bad, or I get lynched. I think it's amazing, and I love the fact that I've got an education now and it's very academic, and I feel very proud of that. But what I found within sort of it is that we still, I think it was a doctor I heard recently say that within 5 years, everything that 50% of what they've learned has basically been sort of chucked out, because of our science is growing so quickly, and yet their CPD is so small, which when you think of how old some of our doctors are and how long they've been in the industry and how far, and yet we still seem to be having the same degrees, we still seem to be teaching the same things at university. um and so, yeah, we need a shift in
We
the
do.
way that we learn and the way that we work and the way that we look at knowledge. And I love the idea of learning from our elders, as well as we need both. We need that sort of the scientific side of academia, that we kind of hold on very tightly to, but we also need the stories around the campfire, because
Absolutely.
thing is, in a textbook.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've given me so much to want to talk about there. I mean, there's I could talk
Yeah,
to you all day,
sorry, I
honestly.
go on a bit.
No, I love it. I love it. It's I just want to make sure that I don't forget anything you've said so I can, because I there's so much that you've said that stood out to me there. First of all, I do think that we on one side of the camp where we've got the positive reinforcement force-free community, we hold on to science and we go, well, if it can't be scientifically proven, then it can't be true. And
Yeah.
although science is extremely useful for what we're doing, it isn't the be all end all. There's lots of things that we've known for decades, long before science confirmed it. Science is often behind the times. So quite often, when we look at the scientific literature, when we look at the studies and how they're formed and how they're formulated and how they get funding and all of that kind of stuff, it's really not a clear cut thing. I think a lot of people, unless you look into how it's done, it's easy to not realize that there's a lot of work that you have to do in order to you have to prove that it's of interest. You have to prove that it's a big enough project for someone, for them to want to take it on. They've got to be funded. Then then there can come in biases. Well, who's funding it? And you can follow the money, and that goes down a huge rabbit hole then. So yes, science is useful, but it doesn't help ethics. It's not because science can be used and weaponized in a way that teaches us that we don't need to be ethical if we don't use it in the right way. So we have to have, and this is why I like the word holistic. And I think that people hear the word holistic and they kind of go, oh, that's a bit woo woo. And
Oh, they're
actually,
working with crystals.
yeah, that's it.
And we get that as well. I think we also have got this thing that I've seen people in the industry that basically have a very operant way of working, but yet they're into crystals, so they call themselves holistic. And it's like, that's not what holistic means. There is nothing wrong with either of the things you're doing, but holistic is looking at the whole. It's looking at everything. It's
Yeah,
not going, I'm a bit woo woo and I like to think outside the box with one thing.
yeah,
It should be everything. It should be the way we're working with everything. And it's changing our mindset, isn't it? That's the
yeah,
it's which is
absolutely.
hard because we're all conditioned. We've all
Oh
been
yeah,
seriously conditioned the way that we do. We're all
yeah,
extremely biased.
absolutely.
Really tough questioning that in ourselves. It's a really hard journey to take, I think.
It is, because I mean, I think in terms of, I mean, a lot of people kind of see my work and they go, well, are you saying that conditioning doesn't happen? I'm like, no, 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 it does. It absolutely happens all the time naturally. What I'm saying is that we don't want to hyper focus on using it, extract it out of its natural format and apply it to every single thing we do, and kind of do everything through the conditioning lens. And
Yeah.
that's where it really becomes quite problematic, and it's quite clear that that's problematic. So in terms of that, I had been conditioned. I like you, I started my career quite early. I was 18 when I started in the dog industry, and I was just straight away into force-free training. I feel quite lucky in the sense that right from the start I was being taught about ethics and everything like that. So I had a good, well, it must have been over 10, yeah, from 2010 to 2020. That was where I had been conditioned in a lot of ways, and I had learned a lot about ethics. And I think the two of those together started to conflict until
Yeah.
it all came to a head in 2020 when I started to, well, it was through lockdown, and I suddenly became someone that was rushed off their feet to silent, like just being dumped into silence like overnight. And I was like, oh, okay, what do I do with myself? So I started and I always describe it, I just pulled a thread. I just went, oh, I'm just going to just research this. And then I pulled a thread and I kept pulling and I kept pulling. And I went, oh my goodness, this is unraveling everything I thought I knew. And that's when I started understanding what holistic actually meant. And, that holistic is literally the entire process. It's the entire thing. It's not just looking at one aspect. And I don't think you can be holistic if you're only working from operant conditioning, if you're only working from even within behaviorism, because you can do that in a holistic style, definitely, but you can't be
Yeah.
fully holistic if you're only focusing on one learning style, which is all behaviorism allows, is one
Can't be
learning style.
holistic and work on your own. can you?
No.
You cannot be holistic and work on your own, because none of us can do everything.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is where the massive, and I have it. I have severe imposter syndrome. I'm very open about the fact that I suffer with a mood disorder, which can mean that I suffer with extreme anxiety, which always shocks people, because I can be very socially confident, but I can also be very much the opposite as well. And I think letting go of sort of, and I wasn't academic at school either, so I really didn't do well at school. And then I found something I was good at, and when I started studying, the dog behavior was getting extremely high grades and really good feedback. And all of a sudden I was like, wow, I'm loving academics. And it made me feel extremely important and special, and all the things that I hadn't been made to feel as a child in education at all. And so, but then the imposter syndrome really kicked in because of that, because I'd come from more of an arty kind of part of my brain, because I'm much more sort of, I would say, I mean, don't get me wrong, I can't draw, but I've got more of an artistic brain, I guess, and sort of flair for life, if you like, than academic. And then I kind of found that academic side. And then I had this massive struggle in between the two, sort of one pulling me one way and one pulling me the other. And then having that severe imposter syndrome that I had to prove to people that I was knowledgeable enough. And actually, the most freeing thing that I've done, and the thing that's really helped me, has been able to say, I get things wrong all the time. I don't know everything, but I have an amazing community around me that I can go, well, no, I don't know how to do this, but this person might. And these beautiful open discussions, where I've stopped being scared of saying I don't know, because after almost 10 years of just constant studying to prove that I know what I'm talking about, and I still don't feel I know what I'm talking about. But that's the beauty, is when you can really say, I will never know. It's just, everything is so nuanced, everything is so. And so this is why I think the whole, when we do just look at operant and sort of that way of dealing with things, it just shows how surface level it is, and how much we're missing when that's the way our brains are going. But it does show, I mean, we are so conditioned. I do a talk on biases and how important biases are in our industry. And I did some amazing, if anyone gets the opportunity, go on to some of the university sites that are studying bias and do some of the bias questionnaires that you can do in games. So there's one in particular that you can do, and there's a one with, you get a man's face and a woman's face, and you have to put certain words into under each category as quickly as you can, and then they swap the pictures over.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, it's really interesting and really shows that we are, I mean, I would like to class myself as as quite forward thinking, open-minded. I came out as being extremely pro men. Like, I've obviously been conditioned that men are more powerful than women, that men are better than women. And this is not a slating men thing at all, because it does such a disservice to men as well. I mean, it's just, it's awful to see what it does to men's confidence, and how they feel they have to be in our society, because what our society is. But it just showed me how conditioned we are to think in certain ways. And there's one on race, there's a lot on different things, and we do it in working with dogs as well. We've been conditioned that them, getting them to behave in a certain way is the be all end all. That's what's important, for them to be socially acceptable.
Yeah.
And then what the bloody hell, because I'm not socially acceptable, so why the hell should I expect my dogs to be?
Yeah, well, that's a really good point. I think a lot of things that I was seeing in when I was observing everything that we were doing is we do expect our dogs to behave even better than we do. That we
Yeah.
want them to do things that even we can't do. And so, that it's all about looking at it at that surface level through the training lens, where training is everything. If you have the most obedient dog, then that's it. And it doesn't matter if that dog is working through obedience because they're shut down, or they're so overly conditioned they can't think for themselves anymore, so they're no longer as sentient as they could have been. So that was a massive change when I was seeing how we've been conditioned in society, particularly with animals, where we've only recently started to realize that they're sentient beings. And I think that that's quite shocking. That's quite telling, how we view animals. But I think that I think there's a certain extent where we can allow ourselves to believe certain things because it's more comfortable. It's definitely more
Yes.
comfortable. If animals were not sentient beings, it would make a lot of our life choices a lot easier.
Oh, yes.
And it would make our treatment of them a lot easier, and it's less effort on our half. We don't have to apply a lot of effort if it's not a sentient being. So it does justify a lot of our way of thinking when it comes to animals. And I think that's why a lot in the balance community do tend to go on that. Oh, they're not sentient, they can't feel, they just do. They're just sacks of
Yeah.
flesh that click in, and they behave and they do it, and it's all about showing them who's boss and that kind of thing. But another thing you said that I really loved is that the more, because a phrase came to mind when you're talking about how you feel like you still don't know what you're talking about, and I think that the phrase comes to mind where the more that you learn, the less that you know. And
Yeah.
it's so relevant and it's so true. And I think I've definitely come from a place where I felt that I had to prove myself. I had to work endless hours, go study, and like you, I am not academic, not academically minded. It wasn't natural to me. I did not do well at school in the slightest. And a lot of what, when I look back at that time, I wasn't a good student, and I wasn't a well-behaved student. I was quite what you would call a wild child at that time. And I was very, very misunderstood because I didn't fit within this framework that even at that time, I'm thinking this must have been like 15, 20, no, 20 years ago, something like that, that it was like, if you don't fit within the box of, okay, if you get the reward, you're a good student, and that's everything, that that means that you're great, and it doesn't matter it doesn't matter the reason why you're doing the work that gets you the reward, that you're just focusing on the reward, so therefore you're actually not learning that much. Or if you don't do it, you just get told, you get verbally punished, or you get timeouts, or you get all of that. And I didn't really fit in those boxes very well because I didn't apply myself anymore because I didn't feel I could, because I was told I was stupid and I couldn't do it. But
Yeah.
also I didn't conform to the punishment because I didn't, and I just thought, this is stupid, it's not going to teach me anything. In fact, putting me in isolation was a reward because I hated school and I didn't get on with my schoolmates and I was bullied. So to me, the isolation room, I was like, oh, that is great, peace and quiet. So
Yeah.
they didn't know what to do with me, and I wasn't the only one. I think I represent a lot of students that fall in this category of just being vastly misunderstood. And so I went through my youth, just rebelling and not really applying myself until I had a few people that just believed in me and said, you're not stupid, you can do this. And I started to settle down and start working. I went to university, and I was shocked at that time. I went to university at Animal College, and even then, and this was in when did I do that? That was in 2014. I was really shocked how behind we were even with dogs at that time, and that was at a time where I wasn't holistic at all. I was very much into force-free training, but that was within behaviorism, conditioning, training, all of that kind of stuff. And even then I was looking at it going, why are we doing this to dogs? These dogs are stressed. Why aren't we being taught that this is stressful for the dogs? So I was
Yeah.
really shocked by that. I actually I might get some flack for saying this, but I don't think I learned a lot from university. I did what I needed to do to get by.
That's
I could
really interesting. And it's such a shame, isn't it? Because, when you have come from a background like ours where you didn't do well at school and then you do get into, I mean, I haven't been to uni, but I did, I did a level 6 and a level 5 recently. I went back
Oh, brilliant.
to a level 5 because I wanted it to be a more regulated qualification. So, I wanted to be mapped to ABTC and all of these things. Again, trying to conform because that's what we're told that we should be doing, and that's what's going to make us the best. And yeah, it is shocking because when you do get to that level and then you get really excited and then you've got to almost learn that and then undo it all again, because they're not teaching you to be critical thinkers. They're teaching you to, you know, read off of, and this is across the board in education. I mean, from, you know, I was talking to a friend of mine who's a primary school teacher, and it starts from then. You know, it's all about what you can achieve in an exam. And you know, it's not about how you can apply that information and how you can live with that information and how you can do good with that information. It's all about ticking boxes. And yeah, sadly, that really is just, and that's not, you know, me encouraging. I would still encourage people to go and get an education, because I think we need all aspects, but to keep an open mind that just because our tutors are saying something doesn't actually make it right. It doesn't mean, just because it's something's in a textbook doesn't mean it's right. It's been written by another fallible human being such as yourself that could have got it wrong, and it could be from a study that has been extremely biased and got it wrong. And I think it's weird, isn't it, because we almost separate science from nature, and actually it is the same thing. And I think the thing is that when we talk about science, we're talking about the application from people, you know, and how scientists and how we apply. So, but actually science is everything, isn't it? It's just, but again, we still look at it through this certain lens that it's got to be done. You know, we have citizen science. I mean, look at, you know, some of these people that are teaching us huge amounts of stuff just by observing, you know,
Yeah.
and sort of, so that there are so many different types of science. I think that's the difficulty as well. Yeah, it just opens up a can of worms, doesn't it? And I think this is the problem, is a lot of people are scared by it. I think it's quite scary, because it's, people want black and white answers. People want, you know, this is what works and this is what
Yeah.
doesn't work. And that's not reality. That's, you know, it's, we're all very unique. Our dogs are extremely unique. And that's what I love about the way that, you know, you work. And you know, I've been following lots of your stuff and I'm practicing it with
Oh,
my
brilliant.
doggies at the moment, which I'm really enjoying. I need to look into it more, but yeah, I love it. I love that there are still, so you know, after 10 years of being in this industry and working my ass off to learn as well, I'm constantly learning, that there are still things that come up and surprise me, and that, you know, that I go, oh, actually this is a different way we can do things. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do with my platform, is to embrace all of those things. And you know, so you can find the thing that talks to you and your dog and your lifestyle and what works for you.
Yeah.
um
And I think that's a really, really nice way of doing it, because I think for someone like me, I have felt that I've had to stand alone. At the time, I'm growing a community now, and it hasn't been until that time that I really started to excel in what I'm doing, because I couldn't do it on my own, and I needed other people's opinions, and I wanted people to question me, because I never felt I could question anything that I was taught. And when I did start questioning everything that I was taught, I was viciously mocked. And, you know, quite publicly as well. You know, there was, you know, just a time, it might have been a couple of years ago, where I questioned this kind of theme where we're training dogs, you know, through hill work. And, you know, there were videos of it being promoted, you know, the flashy videos that are very popular. And it was like, I had people that I knew promoted ethics, and I knew promoted that they, you know, they were known in their field for being very good positive dog trainers, who were promoting other people's videos with dogs that were clearly showing stress signs, but still complying with this you know, behavior, with this, oh, I've got to just stay by my person's side. And so I saw that this was
I haven't
being,
hit them, so it's fine.
yeah, exactly. So it was like, okay, well, we're using treats, therefore it's ethical, therefore there
Yeah,
couldn't possibly be anything wrong with how we're doing this. And so I
yeah.
did write a post about it, and I got a lot of flack for that. I got publicly slaughtered for it, and I was, you know, people mocking me, making videos about what I'd said, mocking me. And all I was saying was, look, let's just, I'm not saying that you can never do hill work. I'm not in favor of doing it myself. It's not something I feel is necessary, because a simple, more relaxed, stay close to me is fine. But if you're doing competition, if you're doing sport, just keep it for those short periods of time. You don't need to try to do it on an everyday walk. You don't need to try and get your dog to comply in that way. And I was just pointing out that if we do it like that, look at all the things your dog's missing out on. Like they're not looking around, they're not exploring, they're not thinking, they're not smelling, they're not interacting with their environment or the thing, the people and dogs and animals that are in it. They're solely like, yes, what do you want me to do? Give me the treat, give me the treat, give me the treat. And I was just, and I was questioning that, and then I felt that I couldn't question anything anymore because I didn't want to be publicly slaughtered again. I haven't learnt my lesson because I have carried on
Good.
asking questions, because I thought, no, this has to, because if we all shy away because we've had something negative happen, we're not going to make any changes. So I wanted to build a community where people can question me, because my belief is that if you are doing something that is solid, if you have a theory and it makes sense, if you are talking facts and it makes sense, then you can hold questioning because it won't fall apart. And if you're defensive of it because you're worried about it falling apart, then there's a problem there. So,
Yeah.
and I think that when we are
Don't
purely,
you think that that's exactly it, though, Bethany, is the fact that people got defensive of what you said is because it does strike a chord. And I think this is half the problem, is that quite often when we are ruffling feathers, it's because we make people feel uncomfortable. And we're not doing that because we're being mean. In fact, totally the opposite. We're just saying this is what I think. But what we think questions what people have been doing for a long time, and it scares people, and it's an uncomfortable place to be, and this is where we get the defensiveness. And I've been there before. I do it myself, if somebody says it, not necessarily on this topic, but if someone says something and I feel like I'm doing what they're going against, I can feel myself getting defensive because I feel insecure about that. And I think, oh God, have I been doing something wrong? And then guilt kicks in and you have all of these horrible, so I think this is the thing. And this is why I never, ever judge other people where they're at. It's just, this is where I'm at. And you be wherever you want to be, but let's keep sharing ideas because, I can't. I've been in places and thought things that I now look back at and go, no, I don't agree with my older self. I don't agree with things that I did before. And that's okay. And actually, that's what growth is. And we should be constantly doing that. And I'm so sorry that people have made you feel like that because it's horrible. And it stops people speaking up. Which that's the scariest thing, isn't it? We all need to keep speaking up, but not in a way that's angry and defensive, but that just in a way that we're still open. And everything you said about food, I mean, I'm just doing, well, I've done a talk actually, but I'm doing a talk for some of the students for Dog Genius on exactly that, and sort of I've looked at a lot at why using the overuse of food, and Matilda, my girl, that one behind me,
oh,
asleep
bless her.
in bed. um she's a massive example of how shut down isn't the same as what people think it is. So I think people have shut down in their head as being a dog that's timid and tail tucked and low body posture, and that they won't do anything, they're not excited about anything, they don't show any affection. And that's one form of shutdown. That's not every form of shutdown. So when we look at being shut down, it can just be that certain parts of our personality have been shut down because we're scared to express those. And Matilda is a perfect example of that. I mean, we've had Matilda for just over 18 months now, I think. And as soon as she walked in the house, she jumped up at me, she licked my face. And she's a licker when she's happy. It's not just an appeasement thing. She's just, I think Podenco's in particular, I think can be quite licky. All of my dogs are licky. But she just so eager to kind of be a part of you, wanted to be next to us all the time, got on with our dogs straight away. And people were like, oh, you're so lucky, she's a really easy rescue. She's, she was tied up for the first 7 months of her life, being hit and, treated really, really appallingly,
Oh,
no
bless her.
socialization at all. So the fact that she's come out and been like this is incredible. And I was like, well, just wait, because this isn't, she's shut down. There's a lot of her personality she is not showing us yet. And the more we've got to know Matilda, the more we've seen that there are major trust issues, and a lot of her behaviors are very appeasing, and they're just trying to make sure that we don't hurt her. And she is very biddable, or she was very biddable. She's had 18 months with me. She's now turning around and going, no, I don't want to. And that's what I love, the fact that she's now becoming her true self and she's able to say what she feels comfortable with and what she doesn't feel comfortable with. And if I had started using food a lot and manipulating the way she behaved through that, I feel like I would have continued to shut her down. I don't feel that I would see, her true self, basically, because it would have all been about the food, it just wouldn't. But I haven't. I've just kind of sat back and just allowed her to trust us. And that's basically been our goal for the last 18 months is just, and yes, I now need to put things in place. She is reactive when we're out, unless she can meet dogs. Hate the word reactive, but she
Yeah.
doesn't cope when she first meets another dog. She kind of explodes and her emotions just go ah. But she's great when she actually gets to know a dog. She's brilliant with them. So we've got to now work through that, but for the minute it's just been about allowing her to be herself, because so many people saw her as being like this really confident dog, and I was like, no, that's how she's learned how to get along in life. And I see it in myself. I'm that type of person. I'm the type of person that has shut down a lot of their emotions through the years to keep myself safe, but actually I'm extremely outgoing. I'm very vocal. I talk way too much. So I come across as being extremely confident to other people, but that's not the reality. And if people have over the years constantly rewarded that in me. Oh, you're so confident. Oh, you're so, well, oh, this is amazing. So what have I done? I've encouraged that more and more and more in myself and put myself in more and more difficult situations. Um, so, it's a really difficult balance, isn't it, to get to kind of, and is what you promote so beautifully is it is just about communication,
Yeah.
giving space and communicating. And, that should be for all of us, shouldn't it? Between human to human, not just human to dog.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And you've hit the nail on the head there. I mean, I think when we're looking at things through a certain lens, we have misinterpreted so much when it comes to dogs and of course other animals. I know we do it with horses a lot. I know that there's huge issues in the horse world as well. And I love the people that are doing both. I mean, I know quite a few professionals that are truly holistic and they're tackling both worlds, and I'm like, that is phenomenal. I couldn't do both at the same time. I think that's
No,
incredible.
dogs are enough.
And so I think that what I've recognized is that we do see everything in this very particular lens. And when we close it off, because what we tend to do is we close off conversations that we're not comfortable with. And so that's what I was tackling with when I first started building the CDD method. Even prior to that, I had worked with someone who had told me that I couldn't do, and this person was very, or what I thought very holistic and very much, out of the box of this. But I was told you can't combine it with training at all. So you have to cut off all the training people. I'm thinking, well, that's insane. That's like 99% of everyone, because no one else knows anything else, because that's all we've been taught for over 100 years. So I when I broke away from that, and I was thankful that I did, I decided that I'm going to look at it, think for myself, and even if it does go against the grain, I do think that it's not saying that just because we're doing it a different way, that other way is bad. I don't believe that training is bad at all. I just think that training has a place, but it shouldn't be put at the forefront of everything else. And what you've demonstrated perfectly there is that, because all the advice will be telling you, you've got your rescue dog, you've got to train, get them to socialization classes, get a behaviorist involved, do lots of work. And actually it's the polar opposite, and it's actually, no, just let them breathe, let them work out. They've just come from a completely different situation, a different home, sometimes a different country. And I think that was the case with yours.
Yeah, well, we were in Spain at the time, so but
Oh,
yes,
okay,
she
so
country afterwards.
yeah, so
Yeah.
they're dealing with so much change that they haven't got the capacity at that time to start caring about wanting to sit and learning how to get these treats. And when we're doing that, we are just creating a dog that doesn't think, they just behave to get the treat. And it actually removes the whatever you are getting them to do to in order to get the treat, it actually removes the joy in that thing. The activity, it doesn't matter anymore. And there's been studies on this, loads of studies with children,
Oh,
with humans, and it's all across the board there, that the more we focus on rewards, the less we actually like the thing that got us the reward. So
we should have intrinsic rewards, shouldn't we? The
yeah,
action itself should be rewarding. And I think this is why, and don't get me wrong, scent work can go too far, I think, as well. I see some people again that it starts becoming like this massive competition. And I'm like, for God's sake, can we just do things for the enjoyment of it? But anyway, that's a total other podcast. But scent work, that's why I do love scent work, is that, the reward is intrinsic. It's within a wonderful friend of mine did some tracking. We got locked down together, which was just amazing. And she knew how to track, so we started doing some tracking with Harry, who you met earlier. And she said people use food in scent work, and actually they really don't need to, because it's that the food is more there for us. That
yes, yes,
actually they'll get it because they enjoy doing it, and we weren't using any food, we were just teaching him to track different scents, and he loved it. He didn't need any outward rewards, or he just enjoyed the process. And that's the thing, if we're doing things that are intrinsically rewarding to that individual, then we don't need external rewards. And that's why, when you were saying earlier, people will say, well, we are being conditioned. Well, of course, all of these things, are happening anyway. Conditioning happens, naturally in life, but there's a very big difference between that and constantly marking certain behaviors that we want, and that starts to take away that choice of behavior, instead of doing things in a way that they intrinsically enjoy, just being together and doing things together. I've been doing something. I haven't looked into what you do nearly enough yet, Bethany, because I have not had the time, but I've been
it's
watching a couple
understandable.
of webinars, and I've been listening to different things, and I've started doing a lot with walking with one of my boys, because I walk him on his own quite a lot. um and it's just been so nice, just simplifying my communication with him, being more conscious about the communication that I have with him on walks. And I think I do a lot of it naturally anyway. I think we're quite aligned in that way, that I love that you've shaped that, and you're able to kind of teach people how to do it. And it's made me a lot more mindful of what I've been doing with him, and it's just been lovely. We sat watching squirrels in a tree the other morning, and I mean, he's a Podenco. Anyone that knows Podencos, Podencos and squirrels don't mix, or they think they do. We don't think they do. And don't get me wrong, if the squirrel got too close, I'd be nearly losing my arm. But we actually, and that's just because I've been communicating with him more. I've just been telling him what's been going on, and we've been having a conversation about it, and it was just lovely. We just sat there watching squirrels.
Absolutely.
um,
And this is it. I mean, it's one of those things where I think that not only, obviously, the reason that I started this was to be dog centric and to be a voice for the dogs that I do think they have a voice. It's just we don't listen to it that often. But it was just really to be dog centric. But on the back of that, what I started to see was this was great for people as well, because what they were doing and what dogs were doing and was teaching people how to just be a bit more mindful and just to take time, just to get off the screen and go for a walk, and don't rush it. Enjoy the things that your dogs enjoy. Take note of what your dog's doing. Be more connected and have that. It is more of a conversation, and I think this was where people, I mean, we are getting so far with this now, because people are starting to recognize, I think a lot of people already knew this anyway, that dogs do understand language. And I think this throws people off, makes them a bit uncomfortable. But we do have science to back this up now. It was a bit behind the
And we
time.
have our dogs that back it up all the time.
Well, this
I
is
mean,
it.
I
We've
say certain things in my house, and it's like, oh God, yeah. I mean, how many people spell out certain words?
yeah,
Because if they say them, the dogs get too excited. We
yeah,
know this, don't we? And yet we don't want to accept it on a deeper level.
yeah,
Again, it's all that, it makes us feel more comfortable. And it was interesting what you said earlier as well about our relationship just with animals in general. And the fact that we have to keep ourselves safe and our emotions safe, and there's, I mean, there's whole conversations, aren't there, about that at the moment. And I think this is the problem. We've come so far away from our natural selves and how we should be living, and we're trying to create a new way of living, and it's not really working. We're so disconnected from what we're meant to do. And this is why, I honestly feel like people with neurodiversity, and it's not that their brains don't work. It's not that their brains are different. Their brains are not working well in the society that we've created. Quite
Mm.
often, if you put people back into a society where we were more mindful, that we were living day to day, sort of focused on the important things like looking after our family and communicating with each other and finding our own food and creating together, if we were still doing all those things, we wouldn't be struggling as much. And that's probably why we are seeing a lot more mental health issues.
Yeah.
Um, and that's the other thing, is that filters down to our dogs. Obviously, our dogs really are our mirror, aren't they? And
Yeah.
they're struggling with their mental health, their physical health, because we're in the environments that we're in. We've put ourselves in very unhealthy environments.
Yeah.
And I think there is a massive movement of trying to come away from that, but it's hard. It's very, very difficult, because it's very difficult to live outside of that in the society that we live in.
Yeah.
It's,
Oh, absolutely.
it's
Yeah.
really difficult.
It would be my dream. Partially I see, because it's becoming a bit more of a trend now, people kind of coming outside of this corporate society that we live in, and they're just going, I don't want to go and fight all my life to get a mortgage, so I'm just going to go off the grid. And they join these communities that are also off the grid, and they farm with each other, they help each other. And I just think, if I in another life I would have loved that, and I think it's just because I couldn't do what I
You're
was
still
doing.
young, you've still got chance.
Maybe that'll be my retirement plan.
Yes. Yeah,
I'll
yeah,
just
yeah,
have lots
definitely.
of dogs, and we're living off the grid, and we're taking time in nature. Because yeah, I mean, I've struggled because what I do is predominantly online. I do work in person, but because this is such a big thing, I'm having to edit everything. I'm having to, film a lot of stuff and make videos and make content and check everything and do all this online stuff that can absorb pretty much most of my day. And then I'm like, I want to be out of the house
Oh,
for
yeah.
5 hours in the woods somewhere with my dogs. And that has had an impact because I've got unfitter. So my health is suffering from that because and then when I am going out and force myself, no, I am going out for more than an hour's walk today. And we go out and then I'm feeling guilty. God, now I've got this list of things that I could have done that and should have done. And so you can see your mind wants to do it, but the reality of our life today doesn't allow for it. And I love the fact that dogs kind of, when we do get more in tune with them, and we are in tune with them on that walk, they show us in a very, obviously a very different way, but they show us, like, take the joy in those small things. Like sniffing grass is amazing for them. They're getting so much enrichment from that. And they can read the environment, and they read us really well because they look at us, they watch us. They're not in such a rush to just, yeah, have a quick conversation and then go get back on the phone again. Whereas they take that time to absorb. And I think we can learn a lot from our dogs. And it's what actually spurred me on this week. I've literally just made a new Facebook page for that very purpose, which is called Letters from Dogs. And it's just a nice philosophical thing that it's just from a dog's perspective, how they can teach us something. It's not always about us teaching the dog. They teach us
Oh,
so
I've
much.
learned everything. Yeah, and most of them important stuff. Don't get me wrong, I've needed the guidance of, the people and our education and all of those things. But without the dogs themselves, I wouldn't have learned anything. I mean, every dog that has come into my life, I learn things every day from my dogs. And yeah, I mean, they are the best teachers, without a doubt. And I curse every time we get a dog that, I mean, our lives are extremely limited. I'm very lucky to have the husband that I've got. We also have a wild rat that I rescued. So I mean, our lives are quite ridiculous in many ways. I mean, we literally have to spend 2 hours each night with Widget, or 3 hours really. So 3 hours, but we can't do that together because we've got to be with the dogs as well. So basically I do not spend my evenings now with my husband. One of us has got to be in with Widget the rat, and the other one's got to be with the dogs. And yeah, we've got two dogs that can't be together because of, difficulties there, because we've taken on quite extreme cases. And but I wouldn't have it any other way, because they teach me to be mindful. They teach me to be thankful and grateful for what I've got. And I feel like I've been very lucky that me and my husband do actually have, we're getting there to having that type of life, that it is, much more. I try to grow my own vegetables. I try to be,
Oh,
a bit
lovely.
self-sufficient when I can. So, not enough, but it's one step, isn't it? That's the thing, is start off growing a pot of basil,
Yeah,
just
and that's a
start.
great point. That's a great point because, you know, like I was saying before, yeah, it's not realistic for me to go off grid and, be able to do the project that I'm doing. And I think that's probably the case for most of us. But what we can
Yeah,
do is just start small, take something where, when you do take your dog out for a walk, instead of rushing by or being on the phone or training, even just taking a break from training, just be with your dog, take in what your dog's taking in, give yourself that mindfulness, because just for that, taking all of those things in is going to make you so much healthier. It's going to do
yeah,
so much good for your mental health. Your dog's going to feel more connected to you, and you're going to feel so much more connected to your dog. You're also learning so much about the environment, and you're also learning more about your dog's communication because you're taking the time to see them outside of being trained. So I think there's so many benefits. Just take, even if that's just the only thing that you do just to get yourself back into more of a natural environment, is to do it on a walk. Even if you're walking somewhere urban, even if it's not okay, yeah, we can't help where we live sometimes, and we might live in a city. It's, you can still take from that, you can still, absorb in the
totally.
smells
There's
and
still
get all of that.
insects, there's still plants, there's still things, that you can ground yourself and connect. Again, definitely. I mean, look at the amazing gardens that they're growing in big cities at the moment, and,
Yeah,
and people are starting to bring that more into their lives in cities now. It's so doable. Yeah, and we can still allow our dogs to have freedoms wherever we live. It
yeah.
doesn't matter
Oh,
where we,
absolutely, yeah.
I mean, someone said to me, because their clients lived in small spaces, it restricted them on, they had to be more operant. And I was like, well, I live in a static caravan. So I would tend to disagree with you on that one. It doesn't mean that I have to be more operant at all. So, it's just, again, thinking outside the box. Yes, management is important in certain situations. I love a bit of management. We all need it to keep us safe. But yeah, it's not everything. So I'm being attacked by flies today. Uh,
Looking forward to the end of summer now.
yes. Well, I don't know about that, but yeah, the flies. I'm definitely looking forward to the end of the flies.
But
Uh,
yeah, I think this, it's just really looking at, um I think one of the biggest takeaways as well that's come from this is that it's okay to be wrong. That's something that you said a lot about. There's actually a lot of freedom for being wrong, and I just wanted to talk about that a little bit, because there's two points I want to make on that. Is the first one is that it's definitely right. There's more freedom in just, getting it wrong sometimes and being allowed to make mistakes. You grow from that, like, and you are more likely to be curious to explore other thoughts, other perspectives, other subjects. Like, you're going to be much more creative when you feel that it's okay to make mistakes, and it's okay to be wrong, and it's okay for other people to, disagree with you. That doesn't mean that you're wrong because they disagree, and it doesn't necessarily mean they're wrong either. That there's a lot of beauty in learning from our mistakes, and there's a lot of beauty in just having that space and that freedom to get it wrong sometimes. And I've learned a lot from being wrong, and I've made some bad decisions, and I've learned, and I've become a lot more resilient from making those bad decisions. And I literally just put a video out yesterday about the hard times in my career where I went through two very major events where I thought, okay, that's it, my career's over, I can't go forward with this, because what I wanted to do, the door shut firmly on it both times. And I was going to walk away and just go back into employment and forget it. But I couldn't have imagined at that point that that getting it wrong at that time was one of the best things that could have happened to me, because I couldn't have been where I am today. And the door that shut made another door open. And that got me to a lovely place, where I am today with the CDD method, growing a community. None of the, I mean, when I first started, I didn't even think I'd run a business. I didn't want to run a business. I just wanted to work as a dog trainer's assistant. That's all I ever wanted to do. And that was the door that shut for me. But from that, it pushed me into a different direction. And I feel like now that was the direction I should have, that was a direction that was meant for me. So getting it wrong.
Totally the
Yeah.
direction that you should have gone, without a doubt.
Yeah.
It's yeah, and yeah, you're so right, and it is so freeing, and I think it's something I'm still working on all the time. I still feel myself get defensive over certain things. There's certain things I feel attacked at if they disagree with certain things, and I have to check myself all the time, and have to kind of look at myself and go, why have I been triggered by that? Why is what somebody has said triggered me? Is it because I don't ethically believe in it? And that sometimes can be the case. Or is it because it's triggered something in me where I'm feeling possibly guilty, or that I don't agree with a certain way that I'm behaving, that I possibly need to change? And it's a hard space to be in. But it's amazing discovering yourself more. And I don't, I think a lot of us, because we're so trapped in the society we're in, people say work on yourself, but nobody really says what that means. And it's hard to work on yourself. Yes, we need to love ourselves. It's extremely important to look after ourselves and love ourselves. And I think there's a big difference in between being critical with ourselves and honest with ourselves. And I try not to be critical of myself, which is very easy, because it's very easy to be critical, but to also be honest with myself, that there are sometimes things that I might think and feel that I need to question and I need to look at. And, if something makes me uncomfortable, I need to question why it makes me feel uncomfortable. Is it because that's something I really don't like and that I don't think should be happening? So like obviously animal cruelty is going to make me feel uncomfortable, and I'm going to go, no, I'm quite okay being uncomfortable with animal cruelty. Or is it because it questions something inside me that I need to look at? And yeah, I've had to do a lot of that, and still do all the time. And our dogs are amazing, as you say, teachers
Yeah.
in that, if we allow them,
Yeah.
if we open ourselves up to that enough. But it's not always easy, especially when you've got dogs with special needs, and that might trigger, my dogs trigger me at times, and make me raise my voice or shout or get annoyed or get frustrated, because sometimes they can be extremely difficult to be around. But surprise, surprise, so can I.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, this is it. And that's the other thing, is just, we want, what I want to do, and I think what you're already doing is building a space and a community where it's okay to say stuff like that. Like, we're not perfect. We are going to have times where we might raise our voice where we shouldn't have done. We're
yeah,
human. And I think that we've kind of created the social media dog trainer, where we're perfect. We never get it wrong. We're like the dog genius. Like, we do all this stuff and and we don't get it wrong. And because if we dare to show that we do get it wrong sometimes, we do snap sometimes, we do raise our voice sometimes, then I think the community starts to go, well, that's the illusion. The
force
illusion's
free.
removing. Yeah. And this is the thing. And it's like looking at
Yeah,
what force free actually means, what it really is. And it's not about being perfect, but it's about recognizing, okay, I did that. I should have done it, but I recognize why I did it. And now I need some space. I need to work on why I did that, and not punish ourselves, not make ourselves feel guilty. I work with a lot of clients, and 90% of them, they go through this huge guilt when they realize, okay, I didn't do it the right way. And I'm like, it's not about guilt. There is no point in feeling guilty, because you're not doing it on purpose. You didn't do that willingly. 90% of what you're doing is what you've been told to do anyway. And even when we look at it in a professional sense, 90% of dog trainers and dog professionals are just doing what they've been taught to do as well. So I don't think, you can only know what you know at that time. And it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to go, okay, I was wrong there. or maybe I wasn't on the right path. Maybe it's not even as clear cut as right and wrong, maybe it's a
Yeah.
gray area, but it's just going, it's okay to turn around and go a different direction. You don't have to continue on a path just because you're afraid of what other people are going to act like when you're wrong. And I'm a good example of that because that is literally what I did. I did a whole reversal on my entire career. I had to go, yeah, I did. And that was where I had to sit with myself for a bit, like in lockdown, like, what am I going to do? I've just, everything that I'm learning is contradicting what
It's
I
so
did know.
interesting because it's like we're both crossover trainers, and yet we both started with force free. Because I
Yeah,
started, I was never balanced. And yet there's a crossover to something new now, isn't there? And I think this is the thing: is that I'm coming away from, and it's not about not liking force free. That's just a ridiculous thing to say. But it's just, these terms, positive reinforcement trainer, force free trainer, what do they actually mean? I'm not even sure what they mean anymore. And I think we've made a bit of a rod for our own backs in a way by putting these terms up that, we never show force. Well, of course we show force. We put leads on dogs, we shut doors on dogs. I mean, we have force is part of life. It's, but there are different degrees of it and different ways that we do it and different intentions behind what we do as well. And I think that's, we need a new name. I don't know what
me
name.
too. I've been
Or
trying to
maybe we
think of
don't call ourselves bloody anything and just, but I mean, I think for me, it really does sit that I'm a well-being practitioner for dogs. I think that's, and that is what, for me, it's all about, is teaching people about dogs' well-being, both mental and physical, and how we can be the best guardians we can be, and that is what I feel my role is. I don't feel that I need to train people or dogs. And I'm just like you. There is nothing wrong with training. And I actually think that in some ways we're doing a disservice in so many ways by creating this thing of this is what training is. Actually, training to me should be, when we're talking about sports and extra activities, if you like, that dogs can do, a bit like when kids are at school. It's your after school activities. That's what training should be, in my view. If there are dogs that enjoy doing those things, and there are pros and cons, and again, that's a whole other bloody podcast, but there's pros and cons to all of those things, depending on the dog, depending on you. But to me, they should be the extra activities. That they're not about living with dogs. You don't need to do any of those things to live with a dog. There are cultures across the globe that have no idea what agility is, and yet, surprise, surprise, they still manage to live with dogs perfectly peacefully. So, to say that all of a sudden we've got this breed, we've got that breed, so we need this, we need that, is just, it's not helpful. It's not realistic, because, I don't care what anyone says, not everyone is going to do those things with their dog. So, we need to learn what it is to just be good guardians. It's that simple. I mean, it's not simple, but
yeah,
you know,
but it's the
it is.
sentiment, and it is, and I do think that's a really interesting way of saying it, even with that kind of simplistic look. It isn't simple, but it is in a sense, because instead of filling our life with training games, tricks, all these kind of different tricks that we do and different kind of styles that we do it in, it is a more simplistic approach, in the sense of that it's not simplistic in the fact that it's basic, because it's
Or
far from
easy,
basic
because
or
relationships
easy.
are never easy.
Yeah, absolutely,
Or
absolutely.
rarely.
But it's really just about, first of all, having the realistic expectation of what a dog is, and being okay with a dog, for who they are, and maybe that is going to be a case of going, okay, that's not the dog I had in my head of what I wanted, or what I was told I wanted, or what I was told I would all I needed to do was train a dog, and they'd be perfect, which I, as a trainer, um had that illusion, and
Yeah,
I hold my
that's
hands up
what
to that.
everyone's taught. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's the introduction to any working with dogs. It was
yeah,
my introduction, and I think I was very lucky that I had the mentors that I did, I think, as well. I had Andy Hale was one, and Rachel Meadows, who doesn't do dog training anymore, but both of those are, very out of the box thinkers, both with, I think, backgrounds in mental health and stuff as well. So that, again, it's that different side of looking at things. I think that, so I never went in really as a trainer. I can't even say I did do the classes because that is what was expected of me.
Mm.
But I kind of felt uncomfortable with it from word go. It wasn't me. I didn't give a shit if the dogs could sit, lay down, or stay. It didn't bring me joy. It didn't give me my dopamine hits that I need on a regular basis. It didn't give me any of that. What really gave me joy was understanding dogs and seeing the complexities of them and what it could teach me about myself as well. And I find that fascinating, that the psychology of it, of how much understanding dogs can help us understand ourselves, animals in general, other animals, because obviously we're animals anyway, but understanding other animals can teach us so much about ourselves. And this is the problem. We're constantly trying to fix them. And actually what we need to do is let them fix us, because we're the ones that are broken. They're fine.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, this is the thing of you. What we're actually trying to achieve with dogs most of the time are things that we're wanting them to achieve it for us. It's not
Yeah.
really for them. And I had a kind of, when I went into training, I actually did really enjoy the training that I did, and I used to love doing all of that. And it wasn't until I really started pulling that thread during lockdown that I started to feel differently about training. So it hit me differently, where I think I love doing it because I was taught that it was such a good positive thing. So I genuinely believed at that time this is the most ethical thing you can do, and I didn't question it. I didn't, because why would I? This is what I've been taught by everyone. All my peers were doing the same thing, and so I had people that would just pat me on the back all the time, like, yeah, that was a great class, or I loved how you run the classes. I had my own assistants coming in and helping me with that, and so I had a lot of people that were reinforcing what I was doing. So it was really, really hard, like a sharp turn, when I was like, oh, okay, I have to contradict everything I've done. And actually it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. It really wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. Yeah, there were hard parts in it. And yes, I got a lot of conflict, but not from people that had always followed me. Not from people that, those people actually stood by me and came with me on the journey, or, respected what I did, but carried on with their journey. It was really just people that I saw as mentors. It was really people that I was told were, in the industry. They were the ones that were like making it a bit difficult for me because they found it offensive that I was doing something a bit different. And I wasn't the only one doing something different, thankfully. I never wanted to do this alone. So it's great to have that community, which I think is great for what you're doing. So I think we'll probably finish up soon, but I want to talk a bit more about your community, what you're building, and how people can get on board with that. And just tell us a little bit about what that is, because I think it's fantastic and I can't wait to get joined up and get involved.
Yeah, we just love to have you. So yeah, I mean, it's called the Canine Wellness Circle. So if you go onto my website, which is the Dog Witch Whole Health for Healthy Behaviour.com, you can join up on there. It's £10 a month. Um, and I don't I see so many platforms being quite large prices, and I want this to be an extremely inclusive community. So it won't be one of those things. It doesn't matter how much I keep putting on there or how much it advances, it's not going to be going over to me. So it's £10 a month, and I do 2 guest spots a month. So get people in like yourself. I've got you booked in for next year coming on. I've got Mark Beckoff at the end of the week, which I'm tomorrow actually, which I'm very excited about. But I have loads of people because, again, I'm really trying to break away from this hierarchical kind of structure as well, that when people come on, you know this worshipping, oh look, we're getting an amazing person. Actually, no, it's about people coming on and us chatting. So very much like me and you have done today, whoever's within the webinar, it's not about, well, it's not webinars, it's us chatting and getting to chat with people that are doing amazing new things that that are interesting to us. So I have 2 guests on a month, and then we also have what we call sage gatherings, and that's just all of us get together or whoever wants to get together, and we can go through case studies, or sometimes we do what we've done here and just put the worlds to rights a bit and talk about different things. So it's very, very easygoing and relaxed. There's a massive section on nutrition, because nutrition is definitely one of my big passions. And then there's the Canine Wellness Library, and that's very much again a collection of, which is growing a lot at the moment. There's webinars from me on there. We talk about what training is, why we don't need to use it as much as we think we do. And then we go into kind of a lot of health stuff. So it's not focused just on behavior. I've had to be very mindful of that, actually, because my background is so behavior based. And I'm not talking about behaviorism necessarily, but more sort of, how we behave in emotions and feelings and all of that, that I've kind of missed out sometimes all the other stuff. So it's right, my dog is singing to me at the moment. I don't know if you can. He's basically saying it's dinner time.
Oh,
And
bless.
yeah. um so yeah, so the library has, people coming on talking about what they do and giving snippets. So for example, I've got a lady that's just put on about how to grow our own herb gardens for our dogs. And you're contributing some stuff about the CDD method. We've got people on there talking about Reiki. We've got, so it covers such a massively broad spectrum of things. So it's for people really that want to just see how to support dogs in, all the amazing, beautiful ways of doing it, and how we can collaborate and pull together as a community, really. So it's kind of celebrating each other. It's all about non-judgment. I have people on there that are feeding their dogs a vegan diet that I don't do personally, but I will support them in the best way that I can to do that, because that's what they ethically stand for. So it's breaking those barriers of that judgment and that constant kind of, you're right, I'm wrong, trying to prove ourselves. It's just safe. It's a safe space to learn, basically. So yeah, hopefully it will grow over time, and
Oh, I'm sure
we'll
it will.
yeah, get more people wanting to chat about the slightly more uncomfortable things sometimes as well, which is nice.
Yeah,
Sometimes
absolutely. I think that's absolutely wonderful. So I think I mean I can see this growing. Definitely. I'll put the links in when I put the video up, so that all our listeners can click directly and join up, because I think that's a fantastic thing. That's also a really good price. As a really nice, I really love what you've done there. And I've had a little sneak peek inside of it. I think it looks so varied. It's so nice, and it doesn't feel like a course structure, which I really like. It feels like a really relaxed environment to have you go in, and you just feel so relaxed there, and you could just pick and choose what you feel like learning about that time, which I think is fantastic. So I really love how you've structured that.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, that's really lovely feedback, actually, because I've tried to, obviously it's kind of in a course structure, because that's how these platforms work, isn't it? But
Yeah.
I don't want people to feel like they have to start at the beginning and work through. It, as you say, it should be more about dipping in and out. I think what I love about it is I've got clients that are like, oh, my dog's just been diagnosed with arthritis, and I'm like, well, go to the nutrition section, go to this section, go to that, and there's, they can dip in because of that. Or my dog is struggling emotionally with this at the moment, so they can pop into different sections. So there's, yeah, and even if you haven't got a dog with any issues and just want to learn about dogs, then there's just loads of educational stuff. So that's kind of, yeah, I want it to be relaxed. I want it to be somewhere that people can just kind of dip in and out of, and enjoy listening and sort of chatting to other people that are as geeky and ridiculous about dogs as we are.
Sounds amazing. Absolutely amazing. I can't wait to dive in, because yeah, it's a community that's truly needed, and it gives everything that we've been discussing, really, just that safe space, that ability to sit with views that we may not agree with but want to just explore. And there's no judgment if you don't want to, there's no judgment if you don't feel like it, but there's also no you're not forced to conform, and I like that. So I think that's a really wonderful progressive way forward in the dog community. So well done, you. I think we definitely need to do more of these because there's so many subjects we can discuss. Maybe we need to do a series.
Yes, I like that idea. I'm well up for that.
Because I think we're both two people that like to talk a lot, and there's too much to say, and in an hour and a half. So
Yeah, I kind of feel like we've gone back and forth over so many different subjects because it's just like almost that we're both very excited to be talking to someone that, has similar ethical ideas about things and, just thinks outside the box a little bit. And it's exciting to meet other people that do as well.
absolutely, definitely. And I think that you're on a journey of what I always say is like encourage people to rewrite the rules. You are definitely rewriting the rules, so thank you for doing that. Well
That's
done.
the best compliment I've had in a very long time.
Well, it's certainly true, and I think it's fantastic. So thank you so much for joining me on my podcast. I think it's fantastic to have you here. I would certainly want you to come back, and we'll have more, because I think so many people can learn from these discussions, and just see a different insight, just see it in a more relaxed way where it can be in a nice safe community. It can be you can sit outside the box. You don't have to conform and force yourself to sit in these two kind of very rigid parties that we've created. So I think
Yeah,
that's a fantastic thing. So thank you so much for coming on it. I've really enjoyed my time with you here.
I've really enjoyed it as well. Thank you for having me.
That's okay.